Oh shit, I remember sitting in my car back in 2020, staring at my bank app and feeling like a total fraud. Peace of mind was nowhere to be found. I had just graduated into a world that felt like it was literally falling apart, and I was holding onto my diploma like it was a life raft in the middle of a Category 5 hurricane. The streets were empty, the news was a non-stop loop of doom, and I was working this entry-level corporate job, wondering if I'd even have a desk to go back to next month. I remember thinking that if I could just squeeze every single penny into some safe corner of the market, I would somehow skip the struggle and find that legendary financial freedom everyone talks about. But then I started studying Michael Burry, the man who predicted the 2008 financial crisis when almost nobody else saw the iceberg coming, and it completely changed how I look at every dollar that hits my account. You know, the story Burry is the founder of Scion Asset Management, a guy who literally lives in the raw data while the rest of the world is busy chasing hype and TikTok trends. He made over $700 million for his investors by betting against the housing market while the experts were still telling everyone that real estate never goes down. And today, right now in 2026, Burry just updated his portfolio, and he is making 5 very specific, very massive bets that most people are too scared to even look at. These are not random picks, because nothing Burry does is ever random. The man is a machine that processes fundamentals until the truth reveals itself. He's looking at Microsoft, PayPal, Adobe, Mississippi CI, and Salesforce. And all of them have one thing in common. They've been absolutely punished by the market sentiment. It feels like a dreary day in the global markets when you see these red candles day after day. But like we say in Australia, when you feeling a little flat, that S usually when the real opportunity is hiding in the shadows. I'm not telling you to copy Burry. I will never tell you to copy anybody, including myself or Warren Buffett, because that is just speculation, not investing. What I want you to understand is the process, the cold, hard numbers that turn a scary headline into a logical, rock-solid investment decision. Let's talk about the IRA trap for a second, because I was recently reading an article titled, "Only about half of IRA savers contribute the maximum allowed." That got me thinking, because based on the most recent IRS data for 2026, about 54% of people who contribute to a traditional IRA are actually maxing it out. The pattern holds across the board. Whether you are 25 or 55, about half of the room is failing to hit that limit, and the average contributions are shockingly low. If you in your early 20s, the average person is only tossing in about $2,000 a year, which barely buys you a decent laptop these days, let alone a retirement, even the folks nearing catch-up age. The 50 to 54-year-olds are only averaging about $4,900, which is far below the 2026 limits. It raises a bigger question: why aren't more people using an IRA to its full potential? And the answer isn't that people are lazy. It is that they are stuck in the wrong tier of saving. I've realized there are 4 different tiers of savers, and most people never get past the second level because they don't have a system, they just have a hope. Tier 1 is the no system zone, where the biggest risk lives, because if you don't have a default setting for success, you are fighting your own biology every single day. Tier 2 is the default saver, usually someone with a 401k or a 403b where automation does the heavy lifting, but you are still playing by your employer. S rules. Tier 3 is the intentional saver, someone who adds an IRA on top of their work plan, moving beyond just what S given to them to create a secondary layer of protection. Then there's S Tier 4, the system builder, where you have the 401k, the IRA, and a taxable brokerage account all working together like a high-performance engine. When you zoom out, you see that Burry is playing at Tier 4 on steroids. He's looking for the mispricings in the market that the default savers are too terrified to touch. Let S dive into his first big bet. Microsoft, a $3 trillion business that the market is actually starting to doubt, which sounds crazy when you say it out loud. Microsoft runs the software that literally powers the offices of the world. From Word and Excel to the massive Azure cloud computing platform. They have deep partnerships with OpenAI, and they own LinkedIn, which I think was their best acquisition ever. Despite all the cringy posts we see on there, Burry calls Microsoft a beaten down mega cap because investors are suddenly worried about the $80 billion they pouring into AI infrastructure. But look at the numbers. Their revenue is sitting at $318 billion, and their profit margins are actually getting better, jumping from 34% over 10 years to 39% this year. When I run my stock analyzer tool on Microsoft, even with conservative revenue growth of 9%, the middle of the road intrinsic value is around $506. With the stock currently floating around 411, you can see why someone like Burry, who loves a good margin of safety, is starting to get interested. It's an aircraft carrier that S humming along, and even though people were calling it a dead company 14 years ago, it's still doubling its earnings potential every few years. Then we have stock number 2, PayPal, which is the ultimate everyone hates this play right now, down over 80% from its all-time highs. PayPal is the button you click at checkout. They own Venmo, and they process over $1 trillion in payments across 200 different markets every single year. The pandemic definitely inflated their valuation, and when growth normalized, the market threw the baby out with the bathwater and the stock plummeted. But the free cash flow is real. They generated $5.5 billion in cash flow last year, and management is buying back shares like they going out of style. When you see a P2 growth ratio, the PEG ratio under 1, it means you re-getting a massive amount of growth for a very cheap price. Burry is putting 3.5% of his portfolio into PayPal because he knows that while competition in fintech is fierce, PayPal has a user base that is massive and loyal. I personally use PayPal for international purchases because I want that extra layer of security, and that kind of brand trust is a moat that numbers don't always fully capture. If we run the math on PayPal with just 4% revenue growth, which is way lower than what analysts think, the low-end price still hits around $60 to $65 with the stock trading where it is. That represents a potential 20% return on your money if the middle assumptions even come close to being true. Then we move to Adobe. Another giant that people think is getting killed by AI and tools like Sora or Midjourney, but they are forgetting how deeply embedded Adobe is in the professional world. Adobe fell from $700 down to the mid-200s, and Burry is increasing his holdings here even as the stock price drops, which is a classic value investor move. When I run the 10-year analysis on Adobe with conservative 6% revenue growth, the middle price comes out to $400 to $550. It's that same feeling of discomfort. The market says AI will replace designers, but the data says Adobe is building the AI tools that designers will use. Then we have MSCI and Salesforce. Two more bets on the infrastructure of the global financial system and corporate America. Salesforce is a target for future addition for Burry because it's been beaten up by the same AI fears that are plaguing the rest of the software sector. I currently have puts on Salesforce for a different strategy, but I can see the allure for a long-term play if you believe their CRM dominance isn't going anywhere. Look, I spend a lot of my time monitoring macroeconomic trends, from inflation rates to housing market affordability and corporate layoff patterns. I see the rent increases, the record high household debt, and the mortgage rates that make you want to scream, and it all reinforces one thing. You cannot afford to not have a system, because the world is going to give you a fair shake unless you build your own shield. I use a dollar cost averaging strategy, focusing on broad market index funds like VU and VTI, because it takes the emotion out of the game, but I also leave room for these calculated bets, these Burry-style plays, where the numbers and the story finally align after a long period of chaos. Most people stay at tier 2 because it is comfortable, but comfort is where wealth goes to die. You have to push into those higher tiers. You need that brokerage account, that freedom fund, because it gives you the ultimate flexibility to retire early or pivot your life when the world changes. Only about 21% of households have a taxable brokerage account, but those are the people who are building real generational wealth. They aren't just saving for a rainy day. They are building an umbrella factory so they can profit from the rain. IV had to learn this the hard way through the stress of 2020 and the uncertainty of the years that followed, but the process works. If you feeling overwhelmed, you not alone. We all feel it. The key is to turn that anxiety into a spreadsheet and start running the numbers. I made a free key metrics PDF for you guys to help you speak the same language as the pros, so you can look at a balance sheet and not feel like you are reading ancient Greek. Click the link in the description, get the PDF, and start training your brain to see the patterns that everyone else is missing. Because once you know what you own and you know what it's worth, the market volatility doesn't scare you anymore. It actually starts to excite you. When the price of a great company drops, you don't panic sell. You look at it like a 50% off sale at your favorite store. That is the difference between an investor and a speculator. And that is how you eventually reach that tier 4 freedom. I want to hear from you. Which one of these 5 stocks do you think is Burry's best move, or do you think CS finally lost his edge? Are you holding any of these, or are you staying far away from the software sector until the AI dust settles? Let's get the conversation started in the comments. I want to see where you guys are at in your own saving tiers. I post new videos every single week to help you navigate this crazy economic landscape, so if you got anything out of this, please give it a like. If you new here, subscribe and join the crew, because we are building something that's meant to last for decades, not just until the next news cycle. Share this with someone who's still stuck at tier 1 and needs that wake-up call to start building their system. I appreciate every single one of you for being here and taking control of your financial future. Keep your head in the data, keep your heart in the long game, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.